here's an example of how I would do a hook'em for a science lesson. This one's going to be on natural hazards. If I was teaching online, what I would do is I would show them this image and I would ask my students, what is this? And someone would probably say a map, or someone eventually would say California. And I would ask, what is California? They would tell me, hopefully it's a state. I would ask them, where is California located? And they would tell me it's on the west coast or west. And I'd ask them which direction's west. That's always a fun question to ask. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually not giving them any information. I'm asking questions because really I'm assessing their prior knowledge and background knowledge. And I'm also getting the inquiry process and the inquiry experience started. So once we have that all solidified, what I then would say is that in California, there is a land formation called the San Andreas Fault. And then I would ask them, how many of you have heard of the San Andreas Fault? And maybe students would volunteer and they would tell me that they maybe visited there, or they've heard about it from a reading, or they know someone who lives there, or most likely most of them will say that they've heard of this because of the movie from the same name, San Andreas, that starred Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson a couple of years ago. And I would ask them what happened in that movie, and they would tell me there was a giant earthquake that caused California to pretty much sink into the ocean. And I had said to them afterwards, I would say, well, what if I told you that that was actually based upon a real scientific theory? The theory is that there's going to be a giant earthquake along the San Andreas Fault, most likely in Southern California, and it's going to cause Southern California to sink into the ocean. And it's going to cause a chain effect up the coast. And what will inevitably happen is that California will sink into the ocean and turn Las Vegas and Yuma, Arizona into beachfront property. So now I've piqued their curiosity, interest, and imagination and wonder. They're picturing about that, could that possibly happen? They're wondering about that possibly happening. Now I got them hooked into the lesson. So now I'm going to hook them either further. I'm going to deepen their knowledge, understanding, and awareness, and I'm going to expand their knowledge and extend their thinking, because I'm going to talk about something that's not widely known. Most likely it's also not in the textbook. I'm going to then ask them, what if I told you there is another fault line? And this fault line runs from Japan to San Francisco. And in the 1700s, the fault line shifted and caused a major tidal wave that wiped out nearly half of Japan. And that the seismologists, and I'm going to ask them what's a seismologist to check their understanding again, and hopefully they'll tell me somebody who studies plate tectonics or earthquakes and rocks. I'm going to ask them, what if I told you that the seismologists are predicting that there's going to be another earthquake, and it's going to shift a different way, and it's going to cause a tsunami that's going to wipe out Northern California. And this tsunami is going to create a chain reaction down the coast of California that will inevitably sink California into the ocean and turn again Las Vegas and Yuma into beachfront property. So now I really got them hooked. So then I'm going to say, okay, so here's what we're going to be exploring in this lesson. Your driving question, which is going to be for your project-based learning or your product-based learning, is how could you analyze and interpret data on natural hazards to forecast future catastrophic events and inform the development of technologies and mitigate their effects? That's going to be the project-based learning or the product-based learning, that driving good question. One of the argumentative questions they're going to go explore is, will the big one be caused by the San Andreas Fault or the Mendocino Fault? So now they're going to have to come up with an argument and defend it and explain it and justify it or refute it with evidence and examples. The topical essential question, which is derived directly from the standard, is going to ask, how can data on natural hazards be analyzed and interpreted to forecast future catastrophic events and inform the development technologies to mitigate their effects? That's straight from the standard. How do I know? Look at that driving question. If I took out how could you, that would give me the learning intention of the standard. The learning intention of the standard is analyze and interpret data on natural hazards to forecast future catastrophic events and inform the development of technologies to mitigate their effects. When I put how could you in front of it, now it becomes a good driving question. When I rephrase it and make it into a question, I take out the verbs and put them later and use the question stem how. Now I have my topical essential question that will set the instructional focus and serve as an assessment. And then I'll ask my students, well, what's something you don't know and understand? And maybe the first thing they'll ask me is, well, what's a natural hazard? Now I'll ask them, okay, what is a natural hazard? Give me an example. And somebody will maybe say tornadoes. And I say, okay, do you want to do tornadoes for your project, for the driving question? Yes. Okay, good. There's that. Give me another one. Maybe someone will say hurricanes. Do you want to do that for your project? Yes. Great. Go ahead. Maybe someone will say floods. That's when I'll say, well, is a flood natural, man-made, or both? You see how I'm using questions here? I'm always using questions to get the kids to stimulate their thinking. All that comes from the hook 'em. All that comes from me hooking them to get them excited and interested in learning this topic.